we're winning at this point. The independent voices, I mean, that's where all the gravitation is going to. That's where people are getting their news now. Nobody's going to any mainstream news channels to get their news anymore. Obviously, we have major inflation, huge debt. Our housing market is teetering really badly right now. And
same, just print cash to keep up with deficit.
We're heading into, which I believe is a currency crisis, not just in Canada and the US as well, and across the whole world. I think inflation is our biggest threat to the economy today, in addition to our major debt that we're seeing in both Canada, the US, and the whole world.
Nobody wants to hear the message that it's your responsibility. Like, if you want to see something happen differently in this country, you have to step up.
If you're fully invested in your business and your business is thriving, and you have some leftover cash, that's where I'm kind of very vocal about getting people investing into precious metals, specifically silver. All right, so today on The Gold Awakening, we welcome Liam DeBoer. Liam out loud, the voice behind the Blendr report and one of Canada's sharpest independent commentators. So Liam is known for his fearless take on corruption, censorship, and the political rot eating away at our democracy. So we're going to dive into not just politics, but also the economy and what it means for gold, silver, and the financial future of Canadians. So Liam, welcome, and thank you for joining our show today.
Thank you for having me, Michael. Looking forward to chatting.
Maybe tell our guests a little bit about your show, The Blendr Report, what made you start it, and why do you think independent voices are so important in Canada right now?
Yeah, so we kind of got started on this project because Jonathan Harvey, my business partner, and I, we both, during the early COVID years, kind of had our life wiped away from us. Jonathan was an entrepreneur. He owned multiple different restaurants in the Toronto area. I actually worked in hospitality as well. I had a good gig going with that. I had just kind of got my dream position as a live music venue director in Toronto. So I was going to be booking bands, putting on shows, that kind of thing. I was always really into the music world. That's what I went to school for and stuff. But then COVID obviously wiped that away. And so it kind of felt like for both of us, at least at the beginning, it was trying to essentially fight for our careers. You know, I wanted to figure out what was going on, especially going into the second lockdowns. That's kind of when I realized, all right, this whole 2 weeks to flatten the curve thing doesn't seem to happen. And I just started looking into things for my own personal reasons as to, do I need to change direction in my life? Like, is working in as a live music director and as a musician, is this even a viable option at this point? And then I quickly learned, you know what? Nope, I don't think this is bouncing back anytime soon. I think I made the right decision to kind of leave that behind me. That's when I picked up a camera. So I do now freelance videography and do a bunch of gigs for that kind of stuff. But then started making videos kind of just what I learned along the way, where I was trying to, so at the very beginning, it was just for both of us, Jonathan and I, it was a personal endeavor. And then we linked up about a year and a half ago. We kind of ran in some similar social circles, but had never met each other. And that's when we decided, okay, you know, you and I obviously both have a kind of knack for the social media and the video stuff. And so why don't we try to get together and build an actual alternative media landscape, or at least an alternative media company in Canada that can kind of push back against this whole subsidized and very, just at this point, it's a massive propaganda machine. And in Canada specifically, you know, 80% of news outlets are subsidized by the government. 90% of the news you see is subsidized by the government. And so that's why we kind of picked media as an institution. Where, like, this is, I think, I would say the two most important institutions in society right now to course correct on are media, so that people can get proper narratives, and education, because it is just completely indoctrinating the kids at this point. And so those are the two lanes. And obviously we had more ability in the media landscape. So yeah, went down this road.
Awesome. Yeah, I agree. I think independent media is huge, and I think it's blowing up in a big way. Are you surprised at how quickly you guys have grown your channels? And what do you think was the main contributing factor to that? Was it like one specific video that just kind of took you to a whole other level, or what kind of, was it just a slow, gradual increase in your channels?
Yeah, it's been funny because Jonathan really blew up during the COVID years. I had a lot of so he got the majority of his following back in like 2021 to 2023 era. And then with me, for the first 2 or 3 years almost while I was doing this, I was having like traction. It took me about 2 to 3 years to get about 20,000 followers on Instagram, had an okay following on other platforms as well, but I wasn't really getting out there. So at that point too, not only for the personal reasons, but a large part of it just kind of felt like I was doing this just for my own sanity's sake. Of I could feel myself in the early days kind of getting my mind molded by that herd and that all this nonstop propaganda. And I was even starting to feel scared speaking out in social circles that I wasn't, I wasn't okay with all of this. And then, so this kind of became like a ripping off the Band-Aid thing. I was like, all right, it's the 3, 2, 1 jump off the cliff kind of mentality. And if I put it out for the open, there's kind of no going back. And so I did it for that reason. So it wasn't really about growing a following in the first place, more kind of just self-preservation. But as soon as Zuckerberg acknowledged the censorship policies and said that he was going to change them back in, I believe it was December of 2024 is kind of when he started having that conversation, conveniently right after the Trump election.
Right.
So as soon as he acknowledged that and they said they were changing the parameters on censorship within Meta and Facebook, my pages skyrocketed. And so it was very clear to me that I was like, oh, okay, yeah, this censorship campaign was very real.
Let's talk about censorship a little bit, especially around Canada as well, and how you think it's shaping Canadian politics today, and what are your thoughts regarding it?
Well, yeah, it's funny because we're in this kind of fight right now as to which way it'll go. In those early years, the censorship machine was definitely winning. I mean, even there's a lawsuit currently going on right now with Alex Berenson about the Biden administration, who had like a back door into all of these social media platforms and was sending requests to these platforms of who to take down. And so there was that, but then there was also kind of like the algorithmic aspect where, they can just tell their algorithms, hey, if somebody mentions the word lab leak, just crush the video. So that was very real, but the truth kind of still prevailed in that sense. Like even that massive censorship machine wasn't enough to kind of hold back the true narratives. But in Canada, it's really bad in the sense where, I mean, America and the platforms are kind of going in one direction right now, but even you see our political leaders saying that we won't have the same relationship with America anymore. And you see them in Mark Carney in the Liberal Party at large falling in line with kind of this European Union idea of censorship and how platforms should be censored. And you see this through hate speech laws, right? With them, they now arrest 30 people a day in the UK, 12,000 people a year for social media posts. And our government is trying to enact the exact same legislation here under hate speech laws bill C-63. And actually even Stephen Guilbeault just came out a couple days ago, I believe it was last week, and said that the new version of that legislation that they'll be introducing under Mark Carney's government, because obviously the parliamentary slate got wiped clean over the election, and they have to retable all the bills. But he even said that they're not going to really change it much from the first at least the second iteration. And so that will come with, if it is completely in line with that second iteration, what you'll see is up to $70,000 fines for quote unquote hate speech online. These complaints can be made anonymously. They'll also have a provision in there where if they can say that harm was done to the complainant, then there can be up to a $20,000 financial reward out of that $70,000 payment. So like, what could go wrong here? Like anonymous people snitching on others for up to a $20,000 reward. This is where I get to with it. And, it was maybe a little hyperbolic now I could see this stuff clearly 4 or 5 years ago, but I understand how people would look at me and think I was being hyperbolic when I said that this was pretty much one to things like the Stasi in East Germany, or whether it be how the Soviet Union ran things. And it's like, yeah, this is exactly what's occurring here. They're trying to build this totalitarian machine. And so I've kind of, yeah, at this point, dedicated my life to fighting it.
I mean, personally, I feel like we're winning at this point. The independent voices. I mean, that's where all the gravitation is going to. That's where people are getting their news now. Nobody's going to any mainstream news channels to get their news anymore. I mean, unless you're 70 years old and older, obviously you're still watching CNN and all that other stuff. But I think the younger generation, and even I'm 50, and I know my friends, they're not getting their news from CNN or anything like that. They're following a bunch of people they believe in on Instagram or YouTube or wherever it may be, and different podcasts like yourselves. And I think that the fact I see it growing so quickly that I think they're too late to the game in any way. And I don't really see how this censorship is going to even work in the end. I mean, what are your thoughts? Do you think it has a chance, or do you think they're too late to the game?
I think it'll work like kind of the same mentality as when, back in the medieval days, you'd line the road up to the castle with heads on pikes to kind of warn anybody this is what happens to you when you speak out. Whether they'll be actually able to censor all of society and, throw these penalties at everybody, that's one thing. But whether they'll be able to make an example out of people like me, or whether they will, I mean, we currently see them doing this with the Tamara Litch and Chris Barber, the two Freedom Convoy organizers, who are getting prepared for, I think Tamara is up for they're seeking a 5-year prison sentence for her and an 8-year prison sentence for Chris Barber. And so they'll look at that and just go, yeah, we don't have to jail everybody. We just have to jail the thought leaders, and all of the people that are in line with that kind of style of thinking will just silence themselves. And that's typically how these kind of things work.
Right. Interesting. All right, let's move into the Canadian economy, because I think that's something that resonates with everybody. Obviously, we have major inflation, huge debt. Our housing market is teetering really badly right now. I know in the bigger cities, the GTA, Vancouver, I mean, you're starting to really see a major slowdown. We're seeing it here as well in Windsor, Ontario. What city are you located in, by the way?
Just outside of Toronto.
Just outside of Toronto. Okay, so I'm assuming what are you seeing in the GTA area in the housing market? Let's start there. And kind of what are your thoughts on the future of the Canadian economy and what that looks like?
Yeah, I don't dive too much into the day-to-day of real estate listing prices. However, I do remember saying 2 or 3 years ago, when the home buying craze was going through the roof, I remember saying to friends, like, I was like, I really can't understand why people are buying these properties. Like, there's not another asset in the world that if I told you it was worth $600,000, you'd say, here's $800,000. Like, it just didn't make sense to me. Like, why are you paying this much value? And so people did that because they have this absurd notion that, well, housing prices can never go down. And, I mean, you see that same kind of logic leading up to the 2008 financial crisis of, housing is rock solid. And then we're getting to this point now, especially and this is what I kind of think is happening, is that those variable mortgages are starting to get put into place, where people's interest rates are going up on their mortgages, and they already overextended themselves initially, even with that initial payment. And then now this one just puts them over the edge. And so you see a lot of people trying to offload their properties that they couldn't actually afford in the first place. And then, yeah, this is where we're seeing a kind of almost, is it historic levels yet? I know we were definitely getting there close as to the number of listings in places like Toronto as far as listings to buyers and type stuff. But
Yeah, I haven't heard that yet, to be honest with you, but I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. Well, I would be surprised, honestly, because I think next year you'll start to see more people listing their house as things become more unaffordable, as the economy actually goes. I think we're in a recession right now, but I think once the mainstream media actually announces that recession, or the Federal Reserve or whoever wants to take ownership of that. Once a recession is announced, I think that's the time where you're going to see record amounts of homes going up for sale and less people buying. And again, to your point, people being underwater with the rates going up, I think it's the same thing for the investors. They're sitting on huge amounts of property or condo buildings, et cetera, and they're in that exact same situation. So it's not just the individual home buyer; it's the actual investors are the biggest drivers of the actual overall residential economy, is because they're the ones buying the developments, the condo buildings, and now they're underwater, so they're going to be trying to sell those for a much lesser price than what they paid for initially. So yeah, I think it's just a combination of all of that is just going to lead to, I believe, the top in the Canadian housing market is in, and I think we got another 30-40% down to go at least in Canada, especially in the bigger cities. Are you a buyer in the real estate market, or are you renting? How are you kind of playing this game? I mean, if I wasn't married personally, I'm married with kids, and my wife is big on owning a home, so we own our house. But I mean, if I was a regular middle class person, I would really strongly consider not owning a home right now and renting and waiting for that housing market correction that I think is long overdue in Canada.
Yeah, that's my mindset personally. Right now, I am trying to keep myself as nimble as possible. I think five years or just before COVID, that's kind of when I was thinking, all right, let's look at what ownership would look like and all of this kind of stuff. But ever since then, I would like to be able to leave the country at a snap of fingers and not have to worry about anything. And that's kind of the position I've kept myself in. I've
Right.
even got rid of a lot of possessions, just random clutter stuff. Like I legitimately could get up and with a backpack and be gone in 24 hours and not have anything left behind pretty much. But yeah, that's my mentality of just kind of seeing how things shake out right now, where we want to go. We've even loosely talked about moving out of Canada, but yeah, to me right now it would be tough to see, unless you're in an amazing financial position,
Right.
like to stress yourself at this point. It would definitely be, I think, a bad call.
So I know there's a lot of Canadians that's thinking the exact same as you, and ready to actually take that leap and move to another country. Where are you kind of, what's your top two or three, I guess, areas that you're looking at right now? And have you started that process around gaining additional passports, or are you kind of at the beginning stages of that right now?
Well, I'm eligible for a British passport, seeing as my mom was born there, but won't be
Mhm.
moving to the UK.
Yeah, I know that's not better.
So that's off the table. But Jonathan and I have discussed either Texas or Florida. No income tax states. That's kind of one of the main ideas there. Also, even just outside of all the political stuff going on, I am over Canadian winters. The idea
Yeah,
of spending five months a year in freezing cold
I
is
hear you.
that's definitely starting to weigh on me now that I don't have the fun aspects of childhood when I snowmobiled, played hockey, all that kind of stuff. Winter's pretty great at that time, but now it's just a nuisance. So that's an idea as well. And then Jonathan's lived in the Cayman Islands before, so that's come up in conversation. I even look at some Central and Southern American states, or sorry, countries that even they have their own issues. I am very much of the mind that you get to pick your problems. It's not that there's some utopia out there that you can move to and all your issues go away. It's just picking your problems. And so that to me is one of the main ones right now, as to where can I go that allows me to keep the money that I earn. And that's one of my main markers, because even I feel it right now in Canada. Like, I know I'm a competent individual. I've worked my way up in every business that I've worked in. I've never been at a job and not been offered a promotion within a year, but I have zero incentive to do that here right now. Like, why? I'm going to go. I was having this conversation with my dad actually recently, where he was like, why don't you get go full time into a more kind of like stable career? And I was like, because I'm making more money right now than I would if I was to up my hours going into a corporate life. I would actually take a pay cut salary, but then also I would end up getting taxed more. It's like, no, I'm okay.
Right.
And so there's zero incentive for me economically here. And so that's kind of one of my main criteria as to where I would go.
So as far as protecting your wealth, I'm a big gold and silver guy. I have my own precious metals store in Windsor, Ontario. I also have an online store in Canada and the United States. So personally, that's where my wealth is. I'm in precious metals and cryptocurrencies. I've been in the crypto market for about 8 years now. I've been in metals for over 10 years. To me, that's the safe haven assets heading into what we're heading into, which I believe is a currency crisis, not just in Canada and the US as well, and across the whole world. I think inflation is our biggest threat to the economy today. In addition to our major debt that we're seeing in both Canada, the U.S., and the whole world. So, what are your thoughts? Are you kind of in this gold and silver camp? Do you look at other opportunities when it comes to investments? How are you telling your followers how to protect their wealth, and what are you personally doing as well?
I'm not much of a financial guy in that sense, as far as tossing out advice. So I understand economics to a decent degree. Like, definitely couldn't go do university lectures or anything on economics, but I know the 101. And so I definitely will comment on the economy at large, but as to giving people advice on to what to do with their finance, that's typically something that I stay away from. I'm in a different position than I think most people, in the sense where I look at investing and keeping my assets secure as self-investment. Like, for me, I look at it and go, okay, the camera on my that I'm right now is actually worth more than my car. And so, like, that's where I put my money, because I look at it as, this gives me a greater ability to, one, do what I think is important, which is this kind of stuff, but then also going and making more cash throughout gigs and all of that kind of stuff with videography. I typically put all of my resources back into just personal, like what will allow me to do more output and better. And so I have a very different scenario than I think most people that are kind of planning long term wise.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think I'm very similar in terms of most of my profitability that I get from my businesses, I reinvest into myself or my businesses to try to grow them, right? I think that's, to me, that's the most important thing you can do, is really grow what you have in terms of from what you're doing from an entrepreneurial standpoint. So I agree with that completely. I think after that, if you're fully invested in your business and your business is thriving, and you have some leftover cash, that's where I'm kind of very vocal about getting people investing into precious metals, specifically silver. I'm a huge silver perma bull. And the only reason I am is because I think the upside in silver is so enormous. I think silver today is like 47 US. We're getting really close to the all-time high of 50. I think once we get above that 50, we're going to double pretty quickly. And I think the upside is absolutely huge. And the reason I talk about as much as I do is because I think you can make 20, 30 times your money in by investing in silver. So a lot of us in Canada, we're just trying to get by paycheck to paycheck, right? I mean, I don't think a lot of us don't have huge amounts that we're sitting on, but silver gives you that luxury. It's a cheap asset. It's costing about $70 Canadian an ounce of silver. So if you could say get an ounce every week or two after you get your pay. So that's kind of why I think silver, to me, it's affordable. It's also an asset that can go up 20, 30 times. So I'm really passionate about and I've done the homework. I've been studying the market for about a couple decades now on a daily basis. That's really where my attention is. It's more on the economy, financial side, how to protect yourself, how to make money. So I really push gold and silver, specifically silver right now. So that's why I brought it up. I wasn't sure if your listeners kind of resonate to that, or it's something you hear a lot about in your circles, or is it kind of something that doesn't get talked about much?
Well, I think it's definitely there. I mean, yeah, I don't outwardly talk too much about gold, silver, Bitcoin, all of that kind of stuff. But I mean, I think it's natural. If you're tapped into these kind of things, you're looking for alternatives. I mean, at this point, you have to, with the way that currency is going. I mean, it's just, the value of our fiat is just tanking. So it doesn't make sense to just hold on to cash in the traditional way at all. It's tough for me to give a assessment of the audience and their feelings on that, because I don't really typically get into that conversation too much, and it's kind of gotten to the point where our audience is large enough that it's hard to actually, I can't keep up with comments or anything like that anymore. So where the head is at, I'm not too sure. But I mean,
Sure.
personally, I'm on the same mindset where I've even made mention of that to my parents before about, hey, you guys, I know you guys got a decent chunk of cash just sitting in the bank account right now. Like, you guys should think about putting that into even some sort of asset, whether it be gold, silver, precious metals, anything, Bitcoin, yeah, that 5 years down the line isn't gonna have in purchasing power.
Exactly. Yeah, and what are your thoughts on the future of inflation? Do you think this is just the beginning, and do you think in the future it's just going to get much, much worse? And also, like, what's your timeline in terms of potentially moving out of Canada? When do you think that mass exodus will begin in Canada? Because I know it's slowly starting, but people are still kind of sticking around. So when do you think this all starts, where people were like, you know what, it's just not affordable anymore, or some other reason that comes from the government?
Yeah, it's tough because I think I am of the mind that the world is infinitely complex, and it's really hard for me to judge. And I think also too, as the further you go out into the future, the less certain you can be. Because more and more variables occur over time. However, if we continue on the same trajectory that we're on, I mean, even the guys that works in the PBO, the Prime Minister's office for budgets, he was just on CTV a couple days ago talking to Vasi, and he was pretty much saying, if we head on this, he's like, we can see the cliff right now, and if we keep going, like, you will go over the cliff. And he's trying not to be an alarmist about it. You can tell he's trying to chuckle here and there, and which is ridiculous. But yeah, I think if we head on that same path that we're looking at, whether it be Weimar Germany, whether it be Argentina, that same just print cash, print cash, print cash to keep up with deficits. I mean, we're at the point now where our payments on debts, at least on the federal level, are more than health transfers. So as to what the federal government doles out to provinces individually for healthcare, they actually spend more money on interest payments. And then we just saw with Mark Carney's budget, right, that it's looking like it'll be $68.5 billion this year. The last time they did that last year, they said it was looking like 40 billion, and then they came in at 60 billion. So, they're saying 68.5 right now. When they get it all actually tallied up and looked at next year, who knows if it'll be that, or maybe it could even be higher. I would guess that it's going to be higher than that $68.5 billion once all the accounting is actually done. When it comes to our financial system, I think the number one thing that people need to realize, and I mean, if your audience is very tapped into the financial markets and stuff, then they'll likely already know this information. But just for the general Canadian, like, they think that the way that government spending works is, well, they take our taxes, they have a bank account just like we do, and then they pay for these social programs throughout it, when in reality, they're printing money in order to pay for these social programs. And then what your taxes are is essentially them lighting that money on fire as a way to try to stop inflation. But when they get to this point where they're printing money like crazy to pay for their deficits, and then you've got a smaller and smaller tax base, right? More wealthy people are leaving the country. I'm sure there's a bunch of people that are just completely fed up not even paying their taxes at this point, or maybe there's just some people that genuinely can't pay their taxes. And so that essentially inflation stopper of trying to light that money on fire after they've printed it is not really applicable right now. And so, yeah, you just end up in this essentially financial death spiral of printing money in order to keep up with inflation, and then more money, more printing equals more inflation. And so once you're in that death spiral, it's really hard to stop it.
So do you see a way around it, or do you just see it's inevitable and it's just a matter of, do you think the system collapses eventually, or do you think they just go into more inflation for the next 100 years? Or do you think there's a reset coming? Because that's the big question. That's what nobody really knows. Like, Because the reality is they can continue to print for another 100 years, and maybe groceries are $10,000 instead of $500 a week. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like that is a potential. Or do you think there's some type of reset where we back our money by gold again and silver or some other commodities that will help fix the problem? Like, how do you think we get out of this? I know they don't. Their plan is to just print to infinity, but like, can somebody come in here and save the day? And or is the plan to collapse the old system and usher in a new one, likely central bank digital currencies? What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, yeah, what will happen, I don't know. But as far as I think what would need to happen is you need to massively slash government programs and spending. Even there's certain things that I think you could cut right off the bat. Like even just the things like, okay, CBC, $1.4 billion. Get rid of that. You've got the Canadian Media Fund, which is about over just roughly $300 million a year that goes to paying grants for media and entertainment organizations to push progressive narratives. Get rid of that. You've got them when it comes to all of these foreign aid programs. We've spent $60 billion on foreign aid since 2017. Like, get rid of that. Why are we giving $1 billion a year to the Taliban? It doesn't make sense. And so there is areas that you could instantly slash that I don't think you would see any negative repercussions to Canadians. Because I know when you talk about these social program cuts and all of this kind of stuff, or even just bureaucracy cuts, people go, well, I need my retirement, my pension plan. You're like, there is a long list of things that you can cut before that. So government spending would be one of them. Go in there with a Malay style chainsaw. And then I think you would need to simultaneously remove a bunch of red tape to the point where businesses can come in and actually start up, give these corporations a tax rate that can compete on the global stage, that makes them want to come here. And then lastly, when it comes to the backing the currency style thing, like, yeah, that would be good. I don't know if our political apparatus would have the will to do something like that. I mean, they were the ones that sold it off 20 years ago, right? So who knows whether they'll do that. But to me, especially on the public spending and the red tape front, like that's the number one. Just that can be done very easily.
I agree. I agree. Now, in terms of Trump's talk around about Canada becoming the 51st state, I know it's kind of quieted down lately, but I know from the time he entered office until just maybe up to a month ago, that's all we heard about is Canada becoming 51st state. And it's like, maybe there's something more to this. I'm of the belief that maybe a North American Union is potentially coming, similar to the European Union, where they merge currencies in Canada and the United States, even potentially Mexico, probably not, and make one big union, stronger economy, stronger currency, backing it by those commodities that both Canada and the US have. What are your thoughts on that? Because obviously the US is going down hard right now. The US dollar is going down hard. By them kind of absorbing Canada and taking over our resources and merging us together, I feel like it gives them a fighting chance. What are your thoughts on that? And what do you think about Canada potentially being the 51st state or a North American Union or some type of merger between the two countries?
I think that would be more ideal than the current strategy of what they're trying to do, which is we're going to, uproot our relationship with the largest economy in the world, the biggest empire in human history, the largest military power on earth. We're going to start taking an adversarial stance towards them. And we just also happen to, share one of the longest unmanned borders with them as well.
Right.
So I think that's really ridiculous. However, when it comes to the 51st state thing, I think it's very important to remember who Trump is and how he operates. He's a business guy first and foremost, and if you think about it, it's negotiation in the sense where when he comes in, Canada is saying we want XYZ through this, and if he feels like Canada is unwilling to waver on its positions, whether it's on things like the border and crime, or whether it's on trade policies when it comes to dairy and the supply management, or even telecommunications, banking, and so on. He just goes, I'm not going to take the position here and try to find a middle ground between here and here. I am going to take it to the furthest possible conclusion that I can, which is how about I just take control of your country? And then we're going to find a middle ground from there, because I'm willing to compromise and give up ground on that position. However, if I start right where you are, I have no negotiating room. And so I think that's his entire mentality with that, is just going, I am going to give you the furthest possible point to say this is where I'm at, and you need to try to get me to back off of it. I don't know if it was ever actually his full intention in the first place, or whether he just looked at it as essentially a masterclass in negotiation. And you can see this, right? Like, these bureaucrats and stuff have no idea how to operate with somebody that has that mentality or that kind of negotiating skill or business acumen. Is like, these bureaucrats they think in terms of, well, we have a 20-year plan, right? And then you got a guy that comes in and goes, actually, you know what, I've got a 1-week plan. So they just have zero idea, and that's why their heads explode and they go, oh my god, the world's ending and he's a maniac and he's all this. It's like, because you don't understand what he's doing. He's toying with you, and you're proving that, yeah, you aren't as intelligent in that realm.
No, I agree. I agree completely. So your political view, I mean, obviously the Liberals somehow got their way in again. Were you voting Conservatives? Or are you kind of a political atheist where you're just like, you know what, both parties are a disaster, and no matter who's in, Canada's going down? Or are you kind of like, let's go Conservatives, they're going to save the day? Like, what is your thought process around politics in Canada and in the world in general?
The analogy that I used is, especially throughout the election a lot, is that if Canada is a house on fire, the Conservatives might not be able to put it out. I don't know if I have a lot of faith in any politicians or bureaucrats for that matter, but I don't feel like they're going to pour gasoline on the fire, lock the doors, and shut the windows so nobody can hear me scream. And that's how I feel the Liberals are going, is that they're going to continue printing money like crazy. They're going to enact censorship laws so that I can't complain about it. So even if the Conservatives weren't able to fix the problem, I didn't see them actively making it worse. It could have gotten worse under the Conservatives still, but I didn't see them like putting fuel on that fire purposefully. And so, yeah, it's funny because I'm definitely like, I've voted 4 times in Canada now. I'm 30 years old. So that's kind of how it's worked out. I've voted for 4 different parties, and most of them have been protest votes. It's kind of like, I'm going to vote for this party because I want to signal to you guys that you're insane. And then from there, like, this is where I find a lot of people, and even in my audience, the free thinkers, the critical thinkers and stuff, like, nobody wants to hear the message that it's your responsibility. And like, if you want to see something happen differently in this country, you have to step up. And I'm not trying to pump my own tires here, but like, I did see that we were heading towards a cliff, and I thought, okay, I'm going to put all of my time and free time and resources towards trying to correct the media landscape. And I look at that very similarly to other people. It's like, don't think that you can just wait 4 years, cast one vote for some party member, and that's going to be your contribution to the country. Like, hey, if you work in law, then, start reforming the justice system in some way that you can, or at least even if you can't have actual sway over the justice system itself, hey, maybe you can start talking about what you see as the issues, change that Overton window of what's going on within law, show the nitty gritty of how they're subverting that system. Or something like education, for instance, as well. Like, even my sister is a great example of it. She's not necessarily as tapped in as I am. She doesn't focus on the news. She's kind of that person that, 2 days will go by and the phone doesn't leave the counter kind of thing. But she homeschools her kids now, and she also even offers